Hey, this is Polly, and I've been thinking, there's a story I'd like to tell. It's something that happened a long time ago. It's a story about a girl named Tina Jones and me. It was about how our lives intersected for the short, brief time that they did. It's a story, well, let's just say it's something that in my life it's a moment I'm very ashamed of. It's a moment I wish that I could take back. One of those things that it stays in your head and you kind of punish yourself with it when your brain decides you need to, maybe you need to be taken down a notch or something. I don't know. But it's a story that, it's a true story. It's a true story. And I'm going to share it here. But first I want to say that I have wished for a long time that I could locate Tina's parents. I don't even know if they're still alive. Her last name was Jones, and I don't know her parents' names, so I really have not got a good way about finding them. Other than we met at church, and possibly I could try to find them through other church members who might have known more about them than I did. I think her father's name was Charles. I don't know. But I really would like to find them because I owe them a huge apology. And I don't know that would mean anything to them. I don't know. But I did something really, really terrible. And I have repented for it. I have taken responsibility for it in my own life, and in terms of feeling miserable about having done it, and then repenting to God about it sincerely and many times. Okay, so the story of Tina Jones and myself. I went to a church in Flint, Michigan. It was a Methodist church, and I didn't know this girl, Tina Jones. I knew quite a few of the kids there because I'd been going there my whole life. And I was probably 11, maybe, at the time. Maybe 11 years old, running around in the church and just messing around with some other kids. And I remember being in the foyer, and there were like 3 steps, and I ran up the 3 steps, and just right there was this very thin, frail looking girl, very thin and very frail, and I was chunky and healthy looking and probably bubbling over with energy, and she just looked sickly. And I remember I just sort of stopped when I saw her because I didn't know she was standing there, and I just sort of ran up the steps and almost right into her. So I stopped and I just looked at her, and didn't know her. I had never seen her there before. And she looked at me for a minute, and then it was really weird because she just reached out with both hands and shoved me, and I fell backward onto the floor. And I don't think I even said anything. I was just stunned, you know? And I wasn't great at defending myself, but I think I just probably got up and walked away and had no idea why she shoved me, why she pushed me down. I had never met her, I had never done anything to her. At the time, I could not possibly imagine what she had against me. And every once in a while I would see her, you know, and I told my mom, I don't like Tina Jones. She's mean, you know, she pushed me down. I think probably a couple other times she hassled me a little bit. Maybe she called me names, or I don't know, just glared at me or something. I mean, she never really did anything violent. I mean, being pushed down was the most she ever did to me. But she didn't like me. Seemed very angry, even. A little angry. I mean, she seemed angry at times, and maybe a little sad. I don't know. Couldn't quite figure her out. Well, we were pretty much Sunday morning churchgoers. Occasionally we would go on Sunday evenings. Rarely did we go on Wednesday evenings. Maybe there for a while, I think, because I was in the youth group, and the youth group did meet on Wednesday nights. But I believe this was a Sunday night, and for some reason we did go to church that Sunday night. And it was a half-hour's drive just to get to Flint. So it was an hour's drive to and from church. So making that drive twice in one day we didn't do that a lot. But that night we did. We went that Sunday night. And I should say that my mom always thought it was funny that, you know, she would tease me about my feud, if you will, with Tina Jones. She thought it was funny, you know, and she would tease me and laugh at me. You know, how's Tina doing today, Polly, you know? You know, she thought that was funny. Kid stuff, you know. Well, we went in and sat down that Sunday. My mom and I were sitting right next to each other. I think I could probably direct you to the exact pew we were sitting in, the exact spot in the sanctuary. And this moment, this service is just very much ingrained in my head. The moments of it, the very emotional moments of it. When they called Tina Jones up to the onto the you know, up toward the podium, you know, where the pastor spoke. They called her up there, and she was like 3 years older than me, but she was so skinny and so frail and pale, and she looked so tiny up there, tiny and alone. She just looked so alone up there. And, you know, I had no idea why they were calling her up there. I was kind of like, why are they calling that you know, that bully up there? But I kind of felt sorry for her, because when she did get up there, she just looked alone. Her parents, they didn't even call her parents up with her. They were there. They were sitting in the congregation, but they didn't call them up. Just Tina. And then whoever it was who had called her up, probably the pastor, but I'm not sure, told us that Tina had leukemia and that she was dying. And that she was dying soon. And I was just, oh yeah, I was like an 11-year-old kid at the time. But I wasn't a heartless, wretched child, I mean, every bit of anger I had for her was just gone. Just in an instant, when I realized she was dying. And I understood why she was so angry. Why she was bullying me. Why she would see me running around, laughing and running around and be angry. I suddenly understood that. I mean, I got it. I got that. I understood that. Every bit of anger and resentment I had toward her was just gone like that. And I did my best to sit there and to not cry. Though I wasn't really successful, my eyes were just tearing up. I mean, filled right up with tears, just like they are now. Maybe, probably worse back then, right there in the moment. And, of course, I didn't want anybody to see me crying, because that's embarrassing, especially my mother, and especially when I was a kid, and especially when it was about, I don't know, I didn't want anybody to see me crying, so I concealed it fairly well, I mean, I'm probably dabbed at my eyes like this, but I was successful in hiding my tears. And it was even made harder by the sobs of the old ladies in the church who just broke down when hearing about it. Well, after the church service was over, as soon as the church service was over, and everybody started to get up, everybody's just kind of blown away by what they said about Tina. And she stood up there and didn't shed a tear. I mean, she just looked alone, and she just looked lost. And maybe even like she had already somewhat dealt with it, I don't know. But everybody got up and started milling around, and my mother immediately turned to me. And she hadn't known that I had been crying. As far as she knew, I sat there very stoically. But I sat there with my heart just broken for this girl. This girl I had previously hated. And my mother turned to me, stood up and turned, I don't know if she stood up, but she turned to me and she said, "So what do you think of her now? What do you think of her now? Do you still hate her?" And that really riled me. I mean, I remember getting so angry at my mother. All this anger immediately built up in me because I wasn't allowed to. I mean, she was attacking me, and she was telling me that I wasn't allowed to feel how I had felt. And the truth was, I didn't feel that way anymore, at all. Not a bit. But when my mother just went after me like that, she was like, "How do you feel about her now?" And I said, "I still hate her." I just said that. It wasn't true. It wasn't true at all. I did not hate her anymore. But I said that. I got immediately angry at my mother in response to her hostility toward me. And I responded and said that I still hated Tina Jones. Which I regret. I mean, that's a small thing. Nobody heard it. I don't think. I mean, there weren't a whole lot of people there that night. So, I don't think anybody heard that. And I do regret having said that. But, I just felt attacked. So, and I don't really remember anything after that. Obviously, we drove home. My mother probably wasn't speaking to me at that time, because that's the way she treated me. If she got angry with me, she wouldn't speak to me. If she thought I did something wrong, she wouldn't speak to me. If she thought I was feeling a way that I shouldn't be allowed to feel, or I shouldn't feel, then she wouldn't speak to me. She would shun me, and with her nostrils flaring, and with this very hostile energy that would make me just kind of, just kind of like this, inside. So, I don't know how many more times I saw Tina Jones at church. I don't know how many more times I ever saw her. And time went on and sort of forgot about it. And then one day, my mother, we're at home. I don't know if it's a Saturday or something, but whatever. But, my mom told me to get dressed up. And she either wouldn't tell me where we were going, or she told me where we were going and it wasn't really where we were going. She lied. So, but I would always have to go with her on errands and stuff like that. She would drag me along. So, I got dressed up, wearing a dress, which I hated to wear because I was a tomboy. So I got dressed up, and I'm sure I complained about that, because I always did, and didn't really know why I had to get dressed up, and I didn't know where we were going. And my mother was very angry at me again that day, and I didn't know why, because I hadn't done anything. I do remember that. I just remember she was very angry with me that day. And it didn't, a lot of times I didn't know why she was angry at me, so that was nothing new, but it was always stressful. Well, anyway, we get in the car, and she just drives toward Flint, which is where we usually went. North toward Flint, and when we got to where we were going, she pulled into a parking lot, and I realized that we were in the parking lot of a funeral home. And I need to give a little background here. At this point, I need to give a little background. I have always been a very, very sensitive person. As a little child, I was a very sensitive little child. The pain that I would feel for myself and the pain that I would feel for other people who were hurting was just so intense. My parents, when I was very little, they would have to take me along if they had to go to a funeral. They couldn't leave me home alone. I was just a little tiny thing. They had to drag me along. They'd take me to the funeral, and I think most kids that age would just sit there and not really react. It wasn't anybody I knew. It was like older people, or from the church that I didn't know, or maybe somebody who had been my dad's patient, who somebody who finally succumbed to illness or whatever, I don't know, but they would take me to funerals that they would go to, and they had to quit doing that because I would sit there and I would cry and cry and cry and sob, and you would be, people would be in this funeral, and here would be this little girl, sitting kind of toward the back, crying, just sobbing, and that she was the only one. I was the only one who couldn't keep myself under control. I was the one. First of all, the idea of death struck me as very sad, of course, and I seemed to understand the finality of it, enough to be very sad. But I also was very sad for the people in the front rows. Just knew that those people in the front rows in the funeral were somehow the people that were the closest to the person that was in the casket. The people in the front rows loved that person who was lying dead in the casket. And those people were hurting.
And that would make me cry. And it got so bad, I couldn't handle it, that my parents stopped taking me. They couldn't take me to funerals because I would react so poorly. And I was absolutely terrified of funeral homes, terrified of cemeteries, terrified of anything that had to do with death. Terrified. And so this one day, we pull into this funeral home, and I don't remember if I knew that Tina had died. That Tina Jones had died. I don't remember if my mom told me that or not, or if I just figured it out when we got there. But I remember my mother yelling at me to get out of the car. And I remember telling her no. And I remember I got out of the car or something, and I didn't want to go in, and I ended up clinging to the side mirror of the driver's side of the car. Because I didn't want to go in. I was clinging to it with both arms, and my mother had to pry me off of the side mirror of her car and physically drag me into this funeral home, which I was terrified of. And my grandmother had died a couple of years before, and at her funeral, there were 7 grandchildren, including my brother, me, and 5 cousins, and the other kids all ran around and explored in the funeral home, and I was the only one who sat in the room, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried until all of a sudden I just burst out laughing. And I wasn't laughing, but I just couldn't cry anymore. I just burst out laughing. Like, ha ha ha. But still, really, I was sobbing. It was like sobbing that came out like laughter. I was there for hours just crying. And the other kids seemed to be okay. They all just went around and played, and somehow my grandma's death didn't hit them so hard. I was like 12 years old at that time. And so my parents gave the oldest kids money and had told them to drive us out to see a movie. And I remember we saw The Empire Strikes Back. I had never seen Star Wars, but, the boys got to pick the movie, so that would be my brother and my cousin Brian, so I didn't care. I really didn't care, just needed to escape. So, that was when I was 12. I was probably 13 or 14 at the time that Tina Jones died. And she would have been 16, I think. And so, here we are, and my mom is dragging me into this funeral home, and she gets me inside the funeral home, and I feel like I'm just shaking inside. I just feel like I feel terror. I actually feel terror, and not just terror, but this anger welling up inside me that my mother is dragging me to this funeral home, this visitation. She's dragging me. And she walked me right up to this door, which was closed. And she stopped before she opened it. She stopped and she said to me, "Don't you dare embarrass me." And I don't remember if I said something. I don't know, but I could feel this anger just coming up inside me, because I wasn't allowed to feel how I felt. I didn't even feel that way anymore, but I wasn't allowed to feel. I was told how I was allowed to feel. My mother wouldn't let me feel a certain way. That wasn't even okay. And she didn't really know how I felt. She had no idea how I felt, how devastated I felt for Tina. She had no idea. But this anger started to build up in me. Here I was terrified, and now I'm just furious. I'm furious, and this is building. And she opens this door after she tells me that. She opens the door, and the first thing she does is she walks me right up to the casket. And she has me stand right there in front of the casket. And she has me look down. She makes me look down at Tina Jones, and she says, "How do you feel now?" And I was so, I can't even tell you how I felt in that moment. And I can't tell you just how much anger had built up in me, how much resentment was in me in that moment when she dragged me up there, made me look at this dead girl's body, and then asked me, "How do you feel now?" And I said to her, I said right over Tina Jones's body, "I don't care. I'm glad she's dead. I hate her. I hate her. I'm glad she's dead." And her parents were just a few feet away. I don't remember anything after that. I don't remember how my mother reacted. I don't remember if she went up and said anything to Tina's parents. I don't remember if she just dragged me out of there. I'm sure she wasn't talking to me again. That was pretty much always the case. I was always feeling the wrong things and doing the wrong things. I don't know, but I walked away from there that day, and I prayed to God. I sincerely, literally prayed to God that somehow Tina's parents did not hear me. That they didn't hear what I said. And I wondered how I could say such an evil thing, looking at the body of a dead child, standing over the body of a dead child. I don't even know that Tina's parents knew that Tina had bullied me. And like I said, I don't even care that she did. I don't care that she did. I understand. I can understand that. I actually dreamt about Tina Jones one time. I dreamt that one time I was walking, and it was almost like I was walking in the streets of London. It looked like that, with the street lamps and kind of dark and kind of mysterious, and it was foggy. And in the dream, I ran into Tina and her dad. Only in that dream, Tina was just like maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I think I was about the age I was either at the time of her death or maybe even at the time when she started bullying me. But I was older, and she was just this little kid. And I realized I have a chance to tell them that she's going to get sick and I can save her. I have a chance to save Tina Jones. I can tell them she's going to develop leukemia. Get help for her now. That was just a dream. I wish it was true. I wish you could go back and do that. I know I was just a kid myself. But I hate what I said. I hate that I said that over the lifeless body of a little girl. And I hate that I said it right there in front of her parents who were hurting so badly. And I hate that my mother wouldn't let me feel however it was I felt. She didn't know how I felt. She didn't know how tremendously, how much compassion I felt. Not just for Tina, but for other people too. I mean, she would tell people that I had compassion, when she was bragging me up to strangers, not when she was pretending that I was this wonderful daughter of hers that she loved and cherished. In public places, she loved me. In public places, she praised me. Well, I mean, except for, the funeral home there. She was just hell-bent on making sure that I felt bad. And I kind of see where she was going with that, I mean, she didn't want to raise a psycho who didn't care. The funny thing is, the really weird thing is, she's the one who has always lacked compassion. Obviously, she found some compassion for Tina Jones that day when we heard that she was dying. But my mother has lacked compassion so many times when I have outright broken down and cried and bawled and sobbed for somebody I didn't know, for somebody whose pain was so tremendous. I hated that I hated that my mother was in charge, that my mother could tell me how I was allowed to feel. That I wasn't allowed to be angry at someone for treating me badly. And like I said, she didn't even know how I felt. So some of that blame goes to her. And I was, 13 or 14 at the time, but old enough to know. Old enough to know that I had done a very terrible thing. And I wish I could find the Joneses. I have wished for a long time that I could find those parents and tell them that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That I didn't mean to be so cruel and so disrespectful to their daughter. To all that was left of their daughter. And maybe their pain was so great, otherwise, maybe that wouldn't make any difference to them. I don't know. Maybe it would just be for me. Maybe it would just make me feel better. But it would. It would make me feel better. I guess that's pretty selfish, but that's the story. That's one burned in my brain. That is a situation that is forever burned in my brain. And Tina Jones has a very special place in my mind and in my heart. She will always have a special place. That's it. That's all. Just wanted to get that out. I just wanted to tell that story. So, thank you.